How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jarrett, and I am here to answer all of your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated, be they left wing or right wing. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all of your questions about politics, and no one's going to judge you or roast you or make fun of you or harass you or debate you or anything like that. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I'm not here to fight people or debate people. I am just here to engage on the substance and try to build a more shared reality with everybody, regardless of if they are left wing or right wing. Ethan says, does ICE gas people or is left wing propaganda? I guess I would ask what you mean by gas. Like, do you mean like tear gas, or do you mean like concentration camp, like murder gas people? Because I haven't seen any reporting that they have been like, doing like Hitler style gassings. But I'm confident that they have been using tear gas. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that they have been. If you shoot me a DM or something, Ethan, I could probably find you an article that confirms or denies that. But yeah, just based on the tactics that they have used that I have seen, it appears to be part of their oeuvre. Like, that doesn't seem to be outside of the scope of the things that they are willing to do, as as law enforcement agencies. Does that answer your question, Ethan? Let me know what you think about that. And to everybody else, welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jarrett, and I'm here to answer questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. Ethan says, are you left wing or right wing? I am left wing. I'm a progressive Democrat. So yeah, everybody's welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle on that, or on the outskirts. I'm not here to judge. You're welcome, Ethan. 199007 says, debate me. No, I don't do debates. 19, I do conversations. I do engagement. I try to change minds. I try to meet people where they are, but I do not debate people. I do not believe that debates are productive. Like, I don't think that either of us should be trying to win an argument. I think we should both be trying to figure out what the reality is, and then maybe we can try to solve the problem. Purple Sky says, what is your expertise? American politics, domestic issues. But I didn't like go to college for politics or anything like that. I have learned all. I'm sort of self-taught in the politics sphere. Ethan says, I used to be MAGA, but now I am America First. Oh, that's interesting. I'd really love to dig into some more of your issues that you really care about, Ethan. Like, we can definitely get into that. What's up, JP? Good to see you again. John Abbott says, ICE has not only been using tear gas, but they have also been using green gas, which is outlawed in war zones because it's a cancer agent. Wow. I didn't know anything about that. One of my other followers, Ethan, is saying that ICE is specifically using a different type of gas that is carcinogenic and actually outlawed in war zones. So it's actually even worse than I thought it was. Okay, Brief But Brief says, why are people against ranked choice voting? Um, I think there could be a good faith argument about it not being a perfect system, but I think that most of the people who object to ranked choice voting probably benefit from the the sort of like gamification and intransigent of our current non-ranked choice voting. Res Fanva says, should we expel all MAGA voters from society? No, I don't believe in punishing voters or disparaging voters. Sophia, my old buddy, great to see you again. What's up, Ecuadorian? Good to see you again. Sophia asks, opinion on what's going on in Iran, and are you America first? So it depends on how you define America first. Like, I don't believe in America first, like, over other nations. Like, I still believe that funding organizations like USAID and sending money and weapons to Ukraine is still a morally right thing to do, and also, logistically and for America, it's the right thing to do. But I also don't believe in, like, endless forever wars and shit like that. I kind of bristle at the phrasing of America first for a couple of reasons. Number one being that it was the slogan of the American Nazi Party during the 1940s, which if you if you're somebody who's been paying attention to Trump for a while, it doesn't seem like that's a coincidence. That's number one. And number two is it kind of feels a little bit more nationalistic as opposed to patriotic, where we're kind of saying like we're better or we need to protect American civilians over civilians of other countries, when I think that we should recognize that every civilian in every country is a person just trying to live their lives just like you and me. And we can cast aspersions on powerful people, like people that are involved in governments of different nations. Like I'll never give that same grace to somebody like Netanyahu. But yeah, I definitely think that we shouldn't be wasting $1 billion a day on forever wars in the Middle East. That doesn't really seem to be the move. Okay, Average Joe says, is your favorite letter of the alphabet D's? Average Joe, that comment seems a little out of character for you, but I'm not judging. You're one of my favorites. All right, let's see here. CMAX, the society didn't have a place to say about the Nazis. It was our government that gave them quarters. I don't know if that's a real thing, CMAC. Knick-Knack Pattywack says, does the presidency even mean anything anymore, or is it all private interest lobbies? So it is accurate, Knick-Knack, to say that private interest lobbyists and rich people and massive corporations have an outsized influence in our government. But the presidency still is an extremely powerful position where you're able to staff agencies. The Trump administration is putting like oil barons in charge of the EPA and shit like that. So like the president can decide whether or not to appoint people to these various positions that are like antithetical to the agencies themselves. Whereas like the Biden administration puts Lena Khan in charge of the Federal Trade Commission, and she was breaking up monopolies left and right. So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of power in the presidency still. And Muzz King, Triska, D. Scott, Sophie, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. Sophia says, so are you against spending money on foreign nations altogether, or just in specific cases like this one? I think it should be a case-by-case basis. Like, I don't think that we should be... I think that we should 100% not be sending money and weapons to Israel. I think we should 100% not be wasting money on stupid forever wars, but making sure that Ukraine can defend itself, helping poor people in, starving nations, or getting people medical care in other nations. Like, that stuff is it's not only morally right and Christ-like, but it is strategically beneficial for us here in America. Like, we do better when we are doing certain types of foreign, spending. All right, let's see here. Nat Moore says, if I had to guess, who is benefiting most from the war in Iran and how much longer it will last? I have no idea how much longer it will last. Who is benefiting the most? Benjamin Netanyahu, military-industrial complex, war hawks like Lindsey Graham, Christian extremists who believe that we need to annihilate Iran to bring about the rapture. I think the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris you could probably put in that bucket as well, although based on how effectively Iran has been at striking back at those people in the region, you could argue that they're getting kind of like a worse outcome than other nations. Nat Moore says, you're forgetting number one. Well, please elucidate me. I already said Netanyahu, so I'm guessing that was going to be your number one. D's Nuts says, how much do you make a year? From doing these live streams, I make about $50 a month, but I'm also a stand-up comedian. I make the lion's share of my money doing that. All right, I missed who helped with the last gift goal, but to everybody who helped with my second gift goal, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah, Nat Moore, who's number one? If it's not Netanyahu. Okay. BitNevo asks, do you think the size of the USA is limiting the effectiveness of national protests? I don't. I actually think that the way that No Kings has been doing it like city by city as opposed to trying to get everybody to DC is probably the move, and I'm glad that is happening. But I think, for any protest movement to be truly effective, you need lots and lots of people to participate. But also, protests are just one of many tools that we should all be using to try to, achieve our goals of a better world and a better government. All right, Ms. Gonna Be All Right, Triska and Muzz King, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal today. That means that we are up to finger hearts, the best part of every day, finger hearts. Okay, finger hearts o'clock. Mr. Ranaj says, "Is communism better than capitalism?" I think they both have their benefits and their drawbacks. I think a mixed system right now is probably best, where we can have private companies, but encourage them to be employee owned and stuff like that. Wes Fanva says, "Has capitalism failed the majority of citizens?" Oh yeah, 100%. If you can't afford things that you desperately need, that is a failure of capitalism. You know, the fact that you can't afford a house, you can't send your kids to college, you can't afford medical care, and for some people it's even worse. Like, people aren't being able to afford their rent or their electric bills or put food on the table. Like, that is capitalism failing, like, full stop. Lindsay Reed, thank you so much for helping me reach my first finger hearts goal of the day. Mr. Ranaj says, "Did you agree with Charlie Kirk?" No, very much not. And while I condemn in the strongest possible language anybody who thinks that they should be able to do murders for political reasons, I am not going to sugarcoat it and say that Charlie Kirk was correct in any of his positions or a good guy. He was a liar and a con artist. All right, Fogwar Productions says, "How can the Democratic Party integrate realigning religious communities into their coalition?" I think probably leaning into the freedom element of it. You know, it's like, we're not saying everybody in America has to be Christian, but we're also saying that you know, you should be free to be a Christian if you would like to be a Christian. And it feels really good when you are a Christian and you have Christian extremists in the government, but you know, I kind of would ask you to kind of like look yourself in the mirror and be like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Like, what if we lived in a nation where Christians were being persecuted against? What if we were treating Christians the way that we treat Muslims or Buddhists or Jewish people, you know, stuff like that. Mr. Ranaj says, "Are you left wing or right wing?" I am left wing. John Abbott, hold on a second, I gotta catch up here. Aviator says, "Hey, there's Twitch chat too." There is. D says, "New slogan, instead of USA first, Papa Jared first." Hope the appointment went well yesterday. Yeah, we're all green lights at the OBGYN. JB says, "I thought the best part of the day of every day was high bear." Well, we don't always get to high bears. So John Abbott says, "Those things are only failures of capitalism if you believe that capitalism is supposed to enable people to afford them." Yeah, I suppose so. But I think that if you talk to people who believe in free market capitalism, that they will tell you that that is part of the goal. Like, there are some fringe elements that believe that, like, if you die because you can't afford healthcare, like, that's your own fault. But I think that the philosophical people, the people who believe in free market capitalism philosophically, will tell you that it solves all problems, that the free market solves for those problems. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know the data on it. All right, Aviator says, "The anti-greed part in my username doesn't mean anything now to me, so it's basically just cosmetic for me." Are you no longer anti-greed? Aviation, Mr. Spamton. All right, Muti Fias III says, "Hear me out. Obama is the second best ever USA president." I'm open to that argument. Mr. Ranaj says, "Should foreigners be allowed to America if they come legally, or America just for Americans?" People should be able to immigrate, and I'll go even a little step further there, that if people come here illegally but are following our laws and are, you know, upstanding members of their community and doing great work and contributing, then I think that we should I think we should meet them halfway and try to help them to become legal citizens. Tyler says, "Do you know anything about UK politics?" All I know is never vote Reform and never vote Tory. Elliot says, "Do you think it's fair Clavicular is the #1 ranked Chad when Zeta literally hogs him?" That's a little over my head, unfortunately. Fogwar Productions says, "I'm officially no longer anti-greed and have given fully into wanton gold lust." I don't know how that's going to work out for you, Fogwar Productions, but I guess go off King, specifically King Midas. Woo, what a smart reference I just made. Toke says, "Are you mad about the UFC White House event?" I'm not really mad about it. I do think it's kind of like a waste of time, energy, and attention. Sophia says, "I agree with you on being against the war in Iran, but I also don't think really we should fund UA or Israel." I mean, I agree I don't think that we should be giving money to. I think you probably mean the UAE, right, Sophia? I'm not really sure. Jeff Speaks says America is made of many different peoples and it works. I agree with that. We could all be a part of making it work better, though, Jeff. Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate that. Spyrus says, why is the Arab world afraid to politically confront Trump? I don't think they're afraid of Trump. I think that they're making a fortune off of Trump. I think that they see Trump as being an extremely corruptible human being, and that works to their benefit because they have a lot of money with which to bribe him. And so they are getting a lot of what they want out of the Trump administration. So yeah, I think that if they really wanted to F with Trump, they could, but he's useful to them. Okay. Fogawar says, I was thinking more along the lines of dwarven style cold sickness. Oh, that's pretty funny. I like that. What's up, Pikachu? What's up, Carmine? Let's see here. John Selfridge asked when my wife is due. It could be any day now, but her official due date is May 2nd. Aviation Mister says, I mean, I am just a bit anti-greed, but to be honest, I don't know why I still have it in my username. I mean, I think that's a totally great thing to have in your username. John Abbott says, people also believe that there has never been mass violence done in the name of Christianity. Lots of people believing it doesn't make it true. Yeah, I think that's generally accurate, but I don't, let us bring people into that reality as as sincerely and as friendly as possible. USA Trump #1 no Iran says, who will give me the most free stuff? Well, if we're going by the Democratic platform, you're not getting free stuff, but we are taxing the wealthy to fund programs that help people like yourself. Ms. Gonna Be Alright says, this Crusades? That is 100%, yeah, that is right there. Fletch Lives Again says, no labor on May 1st. That's really funny, Fletch. And to answer your question, I saw your DM. Like, why do I think that crazy bastards post wasn't actually Trump, but somebody else? It didn't have like a lot of the same language. Like Trump uses the same 50 words every time he truths. And so, yeah, it just seemed a little bit outside of his regular nonsense. Spire says, who has offered more to the world, Democrats or Republicans? Democrats, without a doubt, Democrats. Hunter Kemp says, do you like Playboy Cardi? I don't know if I could tell you a single thing that they have done. Kanye says, Kanye West 2028. No. Phil says, what happened with those 4,000 dividend checks? Oh, they're not going to happen. They never happened. It was a phantom. It was fairy dust, Matthew McConaughey, Wolf of Wall Street. Jeff Speaks says, people need to leave people alone. Where is our mind, our manners? I generally agree with that. Willie says, Republicans have offered a lot to the world, a lot of wars, and they offer a lot to the rich people. Sophia says, I think I put the Ukraine flag, but TikTok maybe censored it. Sophia, if Russia is an adversarial nation that has attacked America in trying to influence its elections, and they're threatening to attack our allies in Europe, don't you think it's a smart thing to do to try to make sure that Ukraine is able to defend themselves against Russia? Do you not think that that's a worthy investment of our taxpayer dollars? Hunter Kemp says, do you think the Iran situation would have been handled differently if Kamala had been elected? 100%, without question. The fact that the Trump administration appeared surprised by the fact that Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz is just, like everybody knew that was a possibility. Everybody who was serious about Middle Eastern issues knew that was the reason why you don't start a war with Iran. If you are going to, you need a contingency plan. So I don't believe that we would be engaged in military action against Iran if Kamala Harris was president. But if there was something that happened that made it so that we would have to, I guarantee you they would have had a plan for that. They would have at least have been expecting that. Okay, let's see here. JRC says, I think they thought they could topple the regime. Well, I think that's probably part of it too. Def Me says, I'm so happy that all the leaders are flying to Pakistan tomorrow for peace talks. Is that happening, Def? I haven't heard about that. Okay. Whole Foods Sandoval says, no, Kamala's only plan was for her to get rich. LOL. You're in question jail, Whole Foods. Ask a question or I'm going to boot you because I don't care for people just saying things that are wrong on my live stream. Joel T says, do you think Epstein was Mossad? I think it's possible. I think it's probably more likely that he was just working for himself. And because he had access to so many wealthy and powerful people and had blackmail material on them, that he was useful to a lot of different intelligence agencies. So it's possible he was working for, the Russians and the Israelis and the Americans and, the British, etc. Okay. Willie says Kamala would have reinstated the JCPOA. I think that's probably accurate. Hey, Chelsea says, you don't believe that Kamala Harris works for Bibi Netanyahu also. No, I do not believe that. Hey, Chelsea. If you listen to the things that Kamala Harris said leading up to the elections, she was trying to balance not going against Biden, who was not doing enough in regards to Israel, but also signaling to everybody else that she will be better on this issue than Biden was. Like, she will be harder against Israel than Biden was. Now, obviously, that was not the narrative that people believed going into that election, and maybe that was a messaging failure on her part. I think that people underestimate how difficult this was during 2024. Like, it's a little bit easier now as people are kind of like recognizing how dangerous and I don't know if there's another bad word I can use there, the Netanyahu government has been. But yeah, like people like you and I can look at that and go like, oh yeah, this is open and shut. We should not be sending more money and weapons to Israel. But it's a lot more complicated for a lot of people in America. Okay, hey Chelsea says, but didn't she fund and support Israel's genocide in Gaza? No. She was the vice president during the Biden administration. It is true that Biden continued to send money and weapons to Israel during their reaction to October 7th. And I am never going to tell you that that was a good thing that he did, but there is a lot of substantive reporting suggesting that Kamala Harris was against that and would have been against that had she won. Sophia says, yes, I think it can be, but something has also threatened the USA, and I don't support funding that war either. Yeah, I guess I understand. I guess I understand where you're coming from, but I do think that there's big differences there, Sophia, where us engaging in a war in Iran is not us supporting a country that is being invaded by one of our adversaries. If Iran were invading France and then we sent money and weapons to France to help them protect themselves against Iran, like, I would support that as well. But I don't support sending money to Israel so that they can be the Russia in that region, like invading and annexing and doing war crimes and genocide. Does that track for you, Sophia? Like, do you agree that there are definitely differences in those two scenarios? Spyra says, I agree with you, but why didn't any Democratic presidents end the Vietnam War? So that one's a little over my head. That's really, that era is not my area of expertise, unfortunately. Steve Jennings says, why do you sound ignorant? I don't think I do, Stephen. What did I say that makes you think that I'm ignorant? Okay, let me get back over to these over here. Aviation says, I hope things stabilize. I hope they do too. John Abbott says, billionaires aren't agents of specific nations. They are multinational corporations trapped in a flesh body. They have no national allegiances. I agree with that, John Abbott. All right. Sabrina says, if you are funded by billionaires, you are not for the people. I completely agree with that, Sabrina. Now, I'd like to put an asterisk on that, Sabrina. Are you still here? I'd love to know if you are going to, if you're going to hear this. But there is a massive political spending gap between Democrats and Republicans. So I give the Democratic Party a little bit more grace in accepting money from giant corporations and billionaires because their platform is to tax giant corporations and billionaires. So at the worst, we will just get a little less of that. But if a Republican gets those seats, then they will do more tax cuts for the billionaire class and giant corporations. Hey, Chelsea says, didn't Kamala admit that she supported Israel's genocide? No, she did not ever do that. Hey, Chelsea, and I'm curious where you got that from. Sophia says, yes, I can agree that it's very different, but overall, shouldn't U.S. citizens be the priority? Yes, Sophia, 100%. But sometimes we are taking care of American citizens by sending money to nations like Ukraine. Like, there is a world in which Russia annexes Ukraine and then continues annexing other NATO nations. And then now we're involved in a direct war with Russia. And that would be way worse for American citizens than us funding and supplying weapons to Ukraine. Does that make sense? Let me know. Spira says, who do you think was the best Democratic president? Oh, I've got no idea. My expertise in American politics gets less and less the further back in time that we go. So I couldn't tell you if Jimmy Carter was better or worse than JFK or whatever. And then there's of course like the whole party switch that happens. So are we judging Democrats pre civil rights movement and I forget what the name of the thing was that LBJ signed that made the party switch. But yeah, I think that Biden and Obama were both really good presidents. I think Clinton was pretty good, but not great. But also he was living in the 90s, which was a much less progressive time than we're living in now. So, we got to kind of grade on a curve. Hey, Chelsea says, didn't you tell me the other day and your other live that you support the Biden and helping Israel? No, I have never said that in my entire life. Hey, Chelsea. Perhaps you are remembering that incorrectly. But no, if you ask me the biggest sin of the Biden administration, I will tell you that is continuing to fund Israel after they had already been found guilty of doing war crimes. Okay, Uncle Hippie said, would you consider slave owners worse presidents? Yeah, generally speaking. I think, I am not the person, as a white person, I am not able to say how much grace we are allowed to give presidents who own slaves. My personal belief is that we kind of have to, grade on a curve based on the era that they were living in. I do think that it's kind of like an obvious thing, no matter when you're alive, that slavery is bad. But I think we're all living in the time now when it's easy for us to recognize that. I would also say that there are presidents that we have had in the 21st and 20th century who would have had slaves if it had been legal, like potentially our current president. I kind of believe that he would. And if you showed me evidence that he currently has them, I would believe that, Sophia says, that makes sense, but the Ukraine-Russia war is long-term, so I don't know how long-term funding will help. I think that's a totally valid perspective, Sophia. And I think right now we're just kind of like getting into the weeds about like at what point do we need to start pressuring Ukraine to accept some sort of a peace arrangements. Should we be pushing Ukraine to accept some land loss in exchange for ending the fighting? Like, are we going to use our leverage there? But it's important to recognize that Russia is a bad faith actor there. And so they have not adhered to treaties in the past that have supposedly kept them from invading Ukraine now. And so how much is any peace treaty with Russia worth without some sort of like, I don't know, some sort of guarantees on the table? But yeah, if we had a responsible and intelligent administration, we could be sort of like arguing about whether that's good or bad. If the current Democratic president is doing enough to pressure Ukraine and getting enough assurances from Russia. But, right now that's like, we're talking about a sci-fi land where right now our president is advocating for they're trying to get elected to Hungary, a guy named Orban, who is allied with Putin, who is giving intel and potentially weapons to Iran to kill American soldiers. So it's like 3 degrees of separation. The Trump administration is advocating for people that are killing American soldiers. Like, we're so far off from, we're arguing in a fantasy world right now, All right, let's see here. Aviation says, I don't support the war that's happening between U.S. and Iran. To be honest, it just feels useless, but feel free to change my mind if there's details I missed. Oh, aviation. No, I don't disagree with that take at all. I think that you are right on. I think we should not be supporting this war and that it is useless. Ooh, Alan James. Carmine, excellent block. Congratulations. Okay, Uncle Hippie says, do you think it pretty much requires great intelligence to be a comedian? Oh no, and I think that Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and Andrew Schultz and their endorsements of Trump and Republicans have proven that you do not need to be smart there. Okay, this ain't right. Says, why are our soldiers even there? I think Trump is not against boots on the ground. I think that he is open to taking over Karg Island. I think he is open to sending in American forces to take all of Iran's enriched uranium. Obviously, that would be both of those things would be psychotic, but I think that he's completely down for that. And I think best case scenario, you could argue that he is using the troops being there as a negotiating tactic. But I also think that he doesn't really give a shit about sacrificing American lives or killing a bunch of brown people in the Middle East. Okay, Clean Fresh Edit says, which of Trump's policies will have the most long-term consequences decades from now? Probably all of the research that was canceled, probably cutting USAID, ruining our reputation on the world stage, and also putting us at a massive technological and medical disadvantage to other nations. All right, Foggerwar says, we are literally establishing the precedent of tolls at naval choke points, LMAO, 100%. Okay, let's see here. Tyler B says, I think comedy uses a different type of intelligence, potentially. Spyra says, why did the U.S. vote that food isn't a human right? I am curious if that would have happened under any other administration, Spyrus, but I think that the Trump administration believes that if you can't afford food, then you deserve to go fucking die. Let's see here. Rune says, do you think nuclear war could happen? I don't, but if it is exactly leaders like Trump that are going to cause it to happen. Rob says, opinion on transgender people. If people want to be transgender, they should be free to be transgender. Jack Fisher says, I feel like both parties are bad in their own way. Why do you think I feel this way? I have no idea why you feel that way, Jack Fisher. I do think that what you're saying is accurate, but I think that there's a difference in scale between the things that are wrong with the Democratic Party and the things that are wrong with the Republican Party. Like, I believe, and I'm happy to make this argument, that the sins of the Republican Party are so much worse than the sins of the Democratic Party that if we were sort of like judging based on a scale, the Democratic Party is basically flawless. If one person's a murderer and one person's a jaywalker, I think we could basically say that the jaywalker has committed zero crimes. Like, I'm prepared to make that case if you do not agree with me. Okay, R says, both parties are bad, both immoral, both don't care about human life, both stand by imperialism. So that is inaccurate, R. There are big differences between the Democratic platform and the Republican platform in regard to morality, caring about human life, standing up against imperialism. I can give you more examples if you like, but if you look at both the governing histories and the platforms, there are massive differences, and Democrats are way better on all those issues that you were just talking about. Irini says, if you had to say one thing the Democrats could work on, what would it be? I think they need to be better to their progressive wing. I think they need to be harsher in their language against Israel and AIPAC. I think that they do a really good job of appealing to the centrist wing. I think they need to. I think they need different leadership as well. I don't think their leadership is doing the right work. Sophie says, I think compromise is better than funding the war, but Biden funded it a lot, so I'm kind of skeptical. Yeah, I generally think that Biden did a pretty good job handling that. They mounted in record time a coalition of nations to sanction Russia. It was demolishing the Russian economy. It was demolishing their military for a while. Now, unfortunately, Russia was kind of able to pivot to a more like wartime economy, so they were able to recover a little bit, but the damage was very much happening, and that, I think, is how you make the change happen in the Russian government, where you get the populace so upset about what their government is doing that they finally are able to resist dictators like Putin. But I can understand if you wanted to have an intellectual disagreement about how Biden handled Ukraine, I'm completely open to that. but just a blanket. I don't think you're saying this, Sophia, but I do think that like a blanket, we should not be funding foreign wars policy is a little losing the forest for the trees. And again, I don't think you think that. I'm just saying, I think what we have is like a more nuanced disagreement about how Biden should have handled Ukraine. All right, Average Joe says, how forgiving are you willing to be to a regretful triple Trumper if they refuse to recognize that they were being duped the whole time? If they are no longer supporting Donald Trump, if they are doing a little bit of work, I just need them to do something. I need them to vote for non-Trump candidates. I need them to do some volunteer work for other types of candidates. Best case scenario, the most that I would forgive is if somebody starts advocating for Democratic politicians because they recognize that Trump was full of shit for a long time. I don't need somebody to go, I was an idiot, I was fooled. But I would like them to do a little bit of work to earn my grace, All right. Diana Reyes says, we gave assurances to Ukraine in exchange for denuclearization. Yeah, that is one of the treaties that Russia backed out on. Puff says, I only want to know when I wouldn't know anymore because they are doing the work. I only want to know when I wouldn't know anymore because they're doing. I'm not sure what that means. Sophia says, I think that Biden funding Ukraine in the beginning made sense, but at one point it kind of felt endless. Yeah, but he was pushing Zelensky to try to accept some kind of a deal with Russia. And, I think that if we had continued under a Democratic president, we probably would have seen more progress on that front. Okay, Diana Raya says, don't vote for APEC-funded Republicans. I agree with that. Yankee Balak Bayan, good to see you again, says, how do we cut ties with the Likud party in Israel and support the people? That is a really good question, Yankee, and I'm not really sure how to answer that because I'm not sure if you mean how does America cut ties with Likud or how do the Israeli people cut ties with the Likud? How do the Israeli people vote Likud out of their government? Let me know what you mean by that. Kek says the Democrats actively sabotage Mamdani. They're actively sabotaging their left and are actively pro-Israel. I disagree with some of that, Kek. I do think that the Democratic Party is skittish. Best phrasing for it is they're skittish about supporting progressive candidates like Mamdani. Worst case scenario, they're actively kind of like trying to stomp them down. And sometimes they do that to protect their own powers. Sometimes they do that because they're worried that embracing those politicians would be politically dangerous for the Democratic Party in general. But I agree with you there. They are not actively pro-Israel. I believe that some of them are, but the politicians who are down for standing up to APEC and down for standing up to Israel are almost exclusively in the Democratic Party. Like half of the Democrats in the Senate voted against sending more money and weapons to Israel. One Republican senator voted against sending money and weapons to Israel. So if you are looking for the party that is willing to stand up to Israel, it is the Democratic Party. Now, do we need more of those people who are eager to stand up to AIPAC in Israel? Yes, 100%. And the way that we get those people is we vote for them. But AIPAC is still very good at losing those Democrats their elections. Like the road is littered with the body of Democratic politicians that tried to stand up to AIPAC. So prove to the Democratic Party that standing up to AIPAC is not a death sentence for their career, and they will be against Israel and against AIPAC. Alrighty, Spyrus says, what would have happened if Hillary had won the 2016 election? That is a hypothetical that I do not feel I have the energy to engage in, Spyrus. I apologize. Diane says, and Citizens United, 100%. Yankee says, right now, Trump is pro-Netanyahu leader of Likud. There are people in Israel that protest against Netanyahu. Yeah, I mean, give us a Democratic president that is willing to stand up to the Likud party, and I believe that they will have less political power within Israel. Sophia says, if healthcare prices were fully transparent, wouldn't the competition lower costs without more government control? Potentially, Sophia. I think that there's an issue of monopolization. I think that there's an issue of inflated costs within both the healthcare sector and the insurance sector. I think that without regulations, we would not be able to get that kind of transparency. I think you're kind of assuming a lot about the free market, though. Like, even if prices for everything were listed on like hospital and doctors' websites, like how much research are you able to do when you are having some kind of a medical emergency? I also think, Sophia, and this is probably, I think, the most important argument to make about that is how morally right is it to tell somebody you have to weigh the quality of your healthcare with how much you are willing to spend. If hospital A is really expensive but has much better healthcare outcomes, and hospital B has, is much cheaper but has much worse healthcare outcomes, like you're kind of putting people in a really shitty position there, like take a risk because you can't afford the nicer, better hospital. Like, do you think that that's an okay thing to tell people to do? Like, let me know about that. R says, give us a Democratic president who's progressive, anti-AIPAC, and anti-Israel, and I will vote for them. So R, are you still here, R? Because I have a very important question for you, R. Let me know if you are still here. I am desperate to engage with you. Average Joe says, speaking of AIPAC, did you finish the reading assignment? I did not, Average Joe. I apologize. My wife's pregnant, so don't have a ton of time. All right, still waiting for R to tell me that they are still here so that I can get into it with them. Hey, R is there. Okay, so R, let me ask you this. We have a general election between a Republican candidate and a Democratic candidate. Both of those candidates take AIPAC money. Both of those candidates are not progressive, but one is a centrist Democrat and the other is a regular ass Republican who believes in trickle down economics and cutting taxes for the wealthy and cutting regulations for giant businesses. Will you vote for a Democratic president that says things like Israel has a right to exist and it's not an apartheid state and they take AIPAC money, over a Republican candidate who does all those things, but also like a bunch of worse things that a centrist Democrat would not do? Let me know what you think about that. R. Zach says, why is the Democratic Party failing on getting votes from progressive people? I think that's a really big question, Zach, and I don't know if it's entirely the fault of the Democratic Party. I think it is true that the Democratic Party could be doing more to embrace their progressive wing, and I do think that there are some people in the Democratic Party who are fighting progressives for like bad faith reasons, like just trying to protect their own power. But I do think that a lot of the reason why people don't vote for the Democratic Party is because of billionaire-funded propaganda. Like, I believe that bot accounts on the internet are convincing people that not voting is better than voting. There are bot accounts that are telling people that if you vote for a centrist Democrat, you are worse than somebody who doesn't vote and allows Trump to win re-election. R says, I would rather vote for the centrist Democrat, but I would choose to not vote at all. I don't know why not voting is a viable option for you, R. Like, if you don't vote for the centrist, and then the Republican wins, like, aren't we getting the worst scenario, R? Like, let me know what you think about that. Yeah, did I answer your question all the way, Zach, about the Democratic Party failing on getting votes from progressives? Let me know. Sophia says, but with transparent healthcare costs, wouldn't high quality costs also go down? Again, potentially, Sophia, but you are asking for the free market to do a lot of that work, and we've seen so many times the free market fail to do that. Like housing costs and college costs are more transparent than health insurance, and you have a lot more time to do research to buy a house and to find out which college you can go to. But that hasn't brought the cost down of those items, right? R says, I just can't vote for pro-Israel apartheid supporter. My gut cannot. So I would ask you to consider, R, that these issues are bigger than you. And that if the families of Renee Good and Alex Preddy and the children that were murdered by American bombs in Iran could talk to you, they would probably beg you to vote for pro-Israel apartheid supporter Democrats, because even with a centrist Democrat who is down with, even if we had Chuck Schumer for president, we would not be doing what we are doing in Iran right now. And ICE would not be doing what they're doing right now. Like, there are family members who do not know where their mothers and fathers and children are right now because they are being illegally detained by ICE or have been deported unlawfully, barbarically to countries that they've never even fucking been to in their life. Not even their countries of origin. Like, are you comfortable telling all those families and all those grieving mothers and fathers and children that you just couldn't bring yourself to vote for the better option that would have kept their family members safe, that would have put their family members back at the kitchen table with them? Like, are you really willing to do that, R? Because I'm not willing to do that. Let me know what you think about that, R. Zach says, why can't Democrats just become fully anti-AIPAC in Israel? It would change everything. So I want to make something 100% clear with you, Zach. Like, I agree with you. I think the difference between somebody like myself and somebody who's like really dogmatic about not supporting Democrats who are wishy-washy on AIPAC in Israel is that I kind of understand the political motivations for Democrats that do that. Because again, if you look at the history of Democrats who have been full-throatedly anti-AIPAC and standing up to Netanyahu, like, a lot of them lose their re-election campaigns because AIPAC is really good at losing people their elections if they put money behind their challengers. So I get it. Like, I get it. I get that it is really easy to label somebody anti-Semitic and have that be something that damages their re-election campaign. You know, and the fact that AIPAC is so well funded means that if you're willing to stand up to them, that means that suddenly you might have a, you know, multi-million-dollar hole in your fundraising initiative, and now you are not able to, you know, run as many TV ads, and that threatens your re-election, even if AIPAC isn't coming after you. You know, Republicans are so much better funded than Democrats. Like, sometimes we just kind of have to give grace to them for where they cut corners and you know, take their campaign money where they can, because at least they're going to legislate better. And at least if they're there instead of a Republican, they're going to be giving power to the exact Democrats that are standing up to AIPAC in Israel, like AOC, like Bernie Sanders, you know, stuff like that. Let me know what you think about that, Zach. Zach says, isn't that bad, though? Shouldn't that push us to want to be more anti-AIPAC because of the power? Yeah, we, the voters, 100% should be. But if a Democrat can't get elected because they stood up to Netanyahu and AIPAC, then we get a Republican in that seat, and they are going to do even less standing up to AIPAC and Netanyahu. So, again, we need to recognize the political motivations of Democrats and the way that politics is uneven and makes it harder for Democratic candidates. Now, our job as progressives who believe that our politicians should be standing up to Israel and standing up to AIPAC is to convince people to vote for the Democrats that do that in both the primary and the general election. But if we are unable to do that, if we in our volunteering and our outreach cannot convince enough people to vote for the anti-AIPAC and anti-Netanyahu Democrat, then it is our job to then vote for the better of the two options, to vote for better over worse, because better is better and worse is worse. Let me know what you think about that, Zach. All right, John Abbott says, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism is about more than just our individual purchasing practices. It also applies to what compromises politicians must make to stay in office. I generally agree with that. Hessenball says, opinion on dictator Mabap. I don't know who that is, unfortunately. Zach says, how did Zohran Mamdani win? And he was anti-AIPAC and Israel. So Zohran Mamdani was extremely popular and running for an election in one of the most progressive cities in America. He was an excellent communicator. He was all over fucking social media. There are politicians who are just as great as Zohran Mamdani. Like, there's this dude, Sykot, in San Francisco, who I've been supporting for a long time, who is getting 10% of the free publicity that Zohran Mamdani got. And so, yeah, if you are popular and famous enough, you can stand up to AIPAC. But those are exceptions as opposed to the rule. All right. Malachi Cherokee says, what's wrong with capitalism? Capitalism has given us healthcare we can't afford, houses we can't afford, college educations that we desperately need that we can't afford, It has given us pollution and climate change and fossil and subsidies for massively profitable corporations like Walmart and shit like that. So yeah, there's a bunch of issues with capitalism. I'm sure that somebody could make an argument for it, but I don't know if I'm really prepared to do that. Puff says Abdul Al Sayed. Yeah, I love Abdul Sayed. Yankee says, how hard is that vote for the people that are close to your ideals? How hard is that vote for the people that are close to your ideals? It's I don't know if it is that what you meant to ask, Yankee? Because I don't think it is hard to vote for people that are close to your ideals, Okay, Zach says, shouldn't Mamdani be a wake-up call to us as Democrats that being anti-Israel gets you more votes? But it doesn't always, Zach. Do you, because I feel like I've said this a couple of times, Zach, I'm not trying to be a dick here, but do you recognize that being anti-AIPAC and anti-Netanyahu is not always a winning political message, or at least it hasn't been in as recent of a past as this year that we are currently in? Like, I can name you Democrats that lost their elections this year, like a month ago, because they were standing up to AIPAC and because they were standing up to Netanyahu. So do you acknowledge that that is a thing? Or do you believe that if you are a Democrat and you go out there and you are aggressively anti-Netanyahu and anti-AIPAC, that you are guaranteed to win your election? Like, let me know what you think about that, Zach. Joseph Granza says, are you a liberal? I mean, I'm a lefty. I call myself a leftist. I call myself a progressive Democrat. But some people equate the left with liberalism and say that they're the same. So, okay, James Welsh says, what is your opinion on Trump? He is one of the worst presidents, if not the worst, one of the most corrupt, if not the most corrupt, irresponsible, dangerous, self-dealing. Yeah, there are not enough negative words that I could say about Donald Trump. James Welsh says, sorry, I meant to say both parties, my bad. What's my opinion on both parties? Is that what you really wanted to ask? James Welsh, let me know. Okay, let's see here. Penguin San Diego says Joe Biden BBL. I mean, I don't know what kind of shelf he was working with beforehand, but if he wants to get a little bit more cake, then I guess that's his right as a citizen. Randy Barber says, is ceasefire being acknowledged, or are there battles still? There are still battles still. Strait is still closed under Iranian control. Asia, I hope that's how you pronounce your name, says, I do understand your point as a Lebanese American with them being called anti-Semitic, which is why I do still support Democrats. I'm glad to hear that, Asia. The Fixer Mike says, I don't think that any candidate lost solely because they are against AIPAC. So the Fixer Mike, let me clarify. I don't think that politicians are losing because they are against AIPAC. I think that they lose because AIPAC knows that they are against them and is funding their challengers. So I don't think that people are hearing that candidates are against AIPAC and then are deciding to vote against them. I think AIPAC is hearing that candidates are anti-AIPAC and then are spending a ton of money to lose them their elections. Let me know what you think about that, the Fixer Mike. Terrence says, where are you in the political compass? I am a progressive Democrat. John says, thoughts on Ro Khanna? Big fan. Sophia says, if you don't trust free market to lower costs because of monopolies, wouldn't transparency expose that? I suppose, Sophia, but I also think we're kind of living in a fantastical world if we think that we can get that kind of transparency when hyper-monopolization continues to be an issue, right? Like, the reason we don't have transparency is because these monopolies are extremely powerful and have a ton of money to throw around. And so they use that money to win politicians their elections that will then make it so that they don't have to be transparent going forward. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Do you guys remember somebody in my chat whose name was just R, and I was asking them about not voting and the moral case for not voting? It seems like they kind of dipped after I started mentioning the families of all the people who have been hurt by allowing Trump to win the election. Like, seems kind of sus, don't you guys think? That this guy is saying, no name, no profile picture. This person R was saying that they would rather not vote at all for a centrist Democrat. And as soon as I asked them to As soon as I asked them to tell me, like, are you willing to tell the families of Alex Preddy and Renee Good that you just couldn't see yourself? You wouldn't be able to live with yourself if you voted for so-and-so? And then they kind of did, oh, are still there. Hey, no, I didn't go. I'm still here. And I was thinking about what you said, and I do agree. Oh, excellent. My bad then, R. I apologize. I'm sorry that I was calling you sus, but I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the things that I said to heart. There are a lot of people that push the narrative about not voting being better than voting, who are specifically doing it because billionaires do not want people voting. And so I try my best to just call out those accounts. But I really appreciate you being here and listening to the things that I'm saying. John says the Biden types aren't going to cut it anymore. Need a leftist populist to unite the country. I generally agree with that, John, but most of the country might not. It's kind of up to the voters in the primary to decide who the Democratic nominee is going to be. And if the voters decide on another centrist instead of another progressive, then that's what the voters chose. Okay, let's see here. Bogo's Benton says, should people who voted for Obama feel guilty because of all the drone strikes he did? I don't think so. Obama didn't campaign on drone striking a bunch of people. And specifically, he did not campaign on accidentally drone striking innocent civilians in an attempt to drone strike terrorists. Okay, let me see here. Average Joe. Hold on a second. Don Homer says, question, if white supremacy is privileging the perspectives and desires of white Europeans, why isn't it white supremacy when modern Western countries enforce anti-racist policy that appeals to the historically emergent tastes of white Europeans? I got to tell you, Don Homer, that question makes absolutely zero sense to me. It's not white supremacy when modern Western countries enforce anti-racist policies that appeal to the historically emergent tastes of white Europeans. I guess it's not white supremacy because it's enforcing anti-racist policies. And if you're a white supremacist, you do not believe in anti-racist policies. You want racist policies instead. Alrighty, let's see here. Terrence says, what do you think of Iran's tit-for-tat, eye-for-eye thingamajig? I'm not 100% sure what you are referring to, Terrence. So sorry about that. Yankee says, remember who controlled Congress the majority of Obama's administration? Yes, I would add to that, remember that Obama was president in 2008, which was not as far away from 9/11 as we are today. I would also mention that Obama was the first black president and was a Democrat. And imagine what would happen if there were any terrorist attacks, civil terrorist attacks, during the administration of the first black president who is also a Democrat. Like, right-wing media would have lost their fucking minds. Everybody would have said Democrats don't care about national security. Democrats are pro-terrorist, et cetera, et cetera. They said all that stuff anyways, and they didn't have a terrorist attack that they could point to. All right, James says, Obama didn't campaign on dropping 24K bombs, so it doesn't count. James, I'm not really sure what point you are trying to make here. Do you believe that Obama should not have murdered terrorists when he was the president? Do you have a problem with how many terrorists he murdered when he was president? Do you have a problem with the collateral damage of the drone strikes? Let me know. John says, Obama led to Trump. There were quite a few Obama voters that switched to Trump in 2016. That is accurate, John. And it is my belief that is because those people were trying to vote for outsiders. And so Trump was the outsider. Bernie Sanders was the outsider. Obama was the outsider. What's up, Ace Bag? I see you. What's going on? So yeah, Nura says, have you been noticing a massive shift on Gen Z Democrats being a lot more progressive and anti-Israel? Yeah, I have. It's not enough for my taste, but it's definitely more, I think. Sophia says, if the U.S. were to expand immigration, how do we ensure it doesn't suppress wages for U.S. workers? That is a really good question, Sophia. And I would say that we need robust labor laws to make sure that if you are hiring somebody who is undocumented, you are still paying them the same amount that you would pay somebody who was a legal resident or a citizen. Let's see here. James says, the reality, if Obama were a white Republican, you wouldn't apologize for him. James, it does not seem as though you are here in good faith, James, because I asked you a question and you did not answer it. Instead, you are just casting aspersions. I'm not here to get into a fight, James. I'm here to engage on the substance. So if you would like to do that, go ahead and ask a question. If you just want to say mean things to me, then I'm going to block you. Wait, James said he did answer. Let me see. All right, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up. No, you didn't. You said your obsession with melanin is why Trump won. And then you said the reality is if Obama were a white Republican, you wouldn't apologize for him. So you're lying, James, and I don't care for liars on my live stream. Okay, let's see here. Bogo's Bench said Trump campaigned on not going to war, then flipped, so I don't think people who voted for him based on his anti-war stance should feel as if they supported the Iran war. I agree with that. Bogo's Bench 100%. Don Homer says, you're assuming white supremacy is about being racist instead of enforcing the supremacy of white perspectives and desires, and on those grounds, rejecting anti-racist policy as being a part of white supremacy. Can you justify that? I think you're just making it way more complicated than it has to be, Don Homer. Like, white supremacists believe that white people are better, which is a fundamentally racist perspective. Let's see here, about being racist instead of enforcing supremacy of white perspectives and desires. Again, we're splitting hairs here, I think. And on those grounds, rejecting anti-racist policy as being a part of white supremacy. Yeah, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. I don't think that you can be a non-racist white supremacist. I don't think that you can be a white supremacist who is good faith against anti-racist policies for better reasons. You know, don't trust me. I'm a white supremacist. I'm doing a hypothetical here. This is not me saying this. I'm saying you're assuming there's a person out there that is saying I am a white supremacist full on, and I do not support anti-racist policies, but I don't support them for a reason that has nothing to do with my white supremacy. That seems like what you're saying, Don Homer. Okay, 312MQ, do not. Sophia says, but then wouldn't that mean an undocumented worker could take the job of a U.S. citizen? Yeah, they could, but that's not really what we see, Sophia. Like, we don't really see undocumented workers taking jobs that U.S. citizens want. You know, there's a reason why farmers are struggling right now and construction companies are struggling right now is because ICE is deporting and detaining the people that used to do that work, and American citizens don't want to do that work and are not doing that work. Let me know what you think about that, Sophia. Okay, good afternoon, Cflon. Alexander says, is it okay to have more right-wing views? I don't think that you're a bad person for having right-wing views, Alexander, and you're definitely welcome here on my live stream if you do have right-wing views, but I don't think that it's a good political philosophy. I would ask you which right-wing views you have and why, because I'm a left-wing person. I don't think that there's really anything substantive or beneficial in the right-wing political philosophy. Mudsking, that is very funny. Alrighty, let's see here. Scrolling up. The Fixer Mike says, if DNC puts up another centrist, they will lose again. Stand up for liberal and leftist values for once. I don't know if that's true, The Fixer Mike. I think that it's possible that, first of all, the DNC does not put up candidates. There are things that look like they have done that, but they don't do that. 99.99% of the time, it is the primary voters that pick who wins the primary. Elliot says, what's more important, forward growth or good IDP? I don't know what that means. Skip Bo 69 says, has there been any business owners who employed undocumented arrested? I don't believe so. I believe that was a policy during the Obama administration, which was to punish the business owners for hiring undocumented workers as opposed to punishing the workers themselves. David says, what do you think is the best UK political party? I don't know, but it's definitely not the Tories, and it is definitely not Reform. Lauren, how's the wife and kids? Kid is still inside the wife at the moment. And she is anxious to introduce our daughter to the world. We went swimming the other day, and she was like, oh my God, this feels amazing. Lena says, opinion on BC. I know many conservative politicians and voters are against it, want to restrict it. Are you talking about birth control, Lena? I'm for birth control. I think that people should have access to birth control. That's how you prevent accidental pregnancies, and preventing accidental pregnancies is how you decrease the number of abortions that happen. Okay. John Abbott says the primary voters may pick the primary, but the DNC picks the primary voters. What do you mean by that, John Abbott? I don't really know if I agree with that. Don Homer says, I don't think they identify as white supremacists. Why would they? Even most actual white supremacists don't identify as white supremacists. Don Homer, there are a lot of people who are proud white supremacists, and Trump getting elected in 2016 brought a lot of them out of the woodwork. So those people definitely exist. Don Homer says, what I'm pointing out is that we have come to believe white supremacy isn't when a white country rules the world through violence. It's when people say slurs. Oh, that's really interesting, Don Homer. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, I am often confounded by the fact that we are more forgiving of people who do racist things than of people who say racist things. You know, like that dude who used to own the Clippers, who had to sell because he got caught on tape saying the N-word. Like, he was doing racist shit that was hurting his players on the Clippers. That was arguably worse than him just saying the N-word to his girlfriend in a conversation that he did not know was taped. But I still think there's value to restricting racist language. Like, I think that the more accepting you are of racist language, I think the easier it is to accept racism in general. But I'm 100% down with, like, what are the policies that we can institute that stop racist practices in addition to racist language? Right. John Abbott says actively ensures centrist candidates will win early. I don't know if that's accurate, John Abbott. Like, the Democratic Party heard the hubbub around superdelegates in 2016. Now they no longer use them. But I also believe that Hillary Clinton got so many more votes that Bernie Sanders, like the superdelegates, I don't really think had that much of a. The states. Yes, so I'm reading that now. By front-loading the primaries with states that are heavily centrist and placing the primaries on days that younger voters will be stuck at work, at least part of the day, not doing ranked choice voting. Ooh, that is interesting. Yeah, I guess I've never considered that, John Abbott. I would want to look more at which Democrats are responsible for doing that. Like, I believe that Biden moved the primary from Iowa, the first primary from Iowa to South Carolina, was it? Or North Carolina? Which is arguably a much more diverse state than Iowa, so at least it was trending in the right direction. Precinct primaries on days that young voters will still be stuck at work at least part of the day. I haven't heard about that happening, John Abbott. I'm curious if that is intentional or just a something that just happens because, we're trying to deal with a complicated calendar. I'm pretty sure that the Democratic Party, depending on which state we're talking about, allows for early voting and vote by mail in the primaries, so that shouldn't be an issue. And as far as ranked choice voting goes, like, they are leaning towards it. It is true that they haven't accepted it yet, but that is kind of like part of their to-do list right now. So I think that you have an interesting perspective there. I don't know if I 100% agree with it. I'd want to see some more reporting on that, though. But yeah, that's interesting. Okay, Lamia says, how would you respond to people who say voting for pro-Israel Democrats is the same as voting for a Republican? I would say that is an inaccurate perspective. If you want details on that, if you want like specifics on that, I would say that a Democratic candidate who is pro-Israel still does less to help a far right-wing Israeli government under Netanyahu than a Democrat in the same position. Like, Biden did way too much to support Netanyahu after October 7th and for the remainder of his presidency. Trump is doing way, way, way more to help Netanyahu during his presidency. Additionally, there are other things that presidents do besides dealing with Israel. For example, a Kamala Harris administration, even if Kamala only did what Biden did, She would not have invaded Iran. She would not have empowered ICE and tripled their budget and turned a blind eye for them, opening up a bunch of detention centers and murdering American citizens and doing illegal kidnappings and stuff like that. That would not be their policy. Alex Priddy and Renee Good would still be alive. It would not be America's policy to deport people to third countries. We would not be paying the dictatorship in El Salvador to be, housing people who were illegally deported there. We would not have done war crimes against the people of Venezuela by murdering a bunch of fishermen off of their coast. We would have somebody in charge of the EPA who actually cared about the environment instead of an oil baron or a coal magnate. We would have somebody in charge of the FTC that was breaking up monopolies. We would have somebody in charge of the NLRB that was siding with the unions. Like a million things that are different, in addition to also being better on Israel. Let me know what you think about that. Lena says, then why do pro-life Republican and conservatives support birth control restrictions if they want less abortions? Because I don't think that pro-life Republican politicians actually want to restrict abortions, Lena. So I have to ask you to clarify, Lena. Are you asking about the voters or are you asking about the politicians? Because I think there's different motivating factors behind those two different groups. So let me know which one you want me to talk about. Tyler says, who do you think the 2028 candidates will be? I have no idea, Tyler. And let's also talk about 2026. Let's make sure that people are voting in the midterms in 2026 and in the primaries for the midterms in 2026 before we start talking about 2028. Alrighty. John Abbott, U.S. Obama, the primary mixes that I'm talking about. Oh, no, I got to that one eventually, John Abbott. Let's see here. Yeah, Lena, let me know. Lena's asking about both. All right, so let's start with the people, the voters. I think that there are people out there who believe that abortion is murder, and they vote that way. They vote for Republicans who say that they're going to stop all abortions, and so they vote for that. I think that there are other people who are in that coalition that also believe that birth control creates promiscuity, and they're against that. Like, they believe that people should be saving themselves for marriage, so that's the reason why they're against birth control. I think that there are people out there who don't, who believe that birth control itself is murder because you are preventing God's will from happening. Pregnancy is not assured depending on when and how you do it. Hold on a second. Triska is going to be all right. Musking and Rob, thank you so much for helping me reach my second finger hearts goal of the day. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of mixed motivations for the voters not wanting there to be birth control. I think if you had to ask me, like, what's the biggest demographic, I think people just think that they're worried that access to contraception makes people promiscuous, and that they believe that is wrong, and that they believe that encourages immoral behavior and sex outside of marriage and stuff like that. Politicians is a different story. The politicians, I believe their motivations are a little bit more sinister because I fundamentally believe that the Republican Party is more sinister. I believe that they want people to be desperate. I believe that they want people to be saddled with children that they cannot afford to take care of. I believe that they want people to be struggling to afford to put food in their mouths and the mouths of their children, working 3 jobs, getting paid really shitty at all 3, potentially getting sexually harassed by their bosses, but not having enough free time to actually do anything about it. I think that is the reason why they are against both birth control and abortion, because they're like, what they're basically saying with their policies is, we want there to be more accidental pregnancies that people cannot afford, so that more poor people are desperate, so more poor people will join the military and will take really shitty jobs at undervalued pay, and they will not have enough free time to get an education or protest or vote or strike or anything like that. Let me know what you think about that. Lena, let me know what you think about that. Tyler Sardina says, as a Republican, I don't understand why anyone would be anti-birth control. I agree, Tyler Sardinas. Why are you a Republican? Why do you call yourself a Republican? Tyler, let me know about that. Don Homer says, I'm not suggesting that there isn't value to restricting racist language. I'm only saying that in Western countries, anti-racism is only mainstream because it appeals to white social and political appetites. I don't know if I agree with that, Don Homer. I think that there are plenty of white people who wish to undo, who wish to utilize racist language. I also think that there are a lot of black and brown people who appreciate restrictions on racist language. So yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. Lena says, like, for example, I checked Sophia's repost and she is on birth control, yet she is pro-life. Makes zero sense. Sophia is, a right-wing person, who lives in a MAGA world, and so she comes here to engage in good faith on the substance. And she and I have gone back and forth about abortion, and clearly she exists in that area where she thinks it's fine to be on birth control, but not fine to get an abortion. People are complicated. Voters are complicated. Triska says, is donating to any PAC a bad idea as far as encouraging campaign fundraising in that way? I don't think so, until we can kind of like unilaterally disarm. I think we need to assist the Democratic Party in any way that we can. Okay, let's see here. Where's my buddy who said that they were Republican? Yeah, Tyler, why do you call yourself a Republican? I'm really curious about that. Where is Tyler? Let me get some Tyler up in here. Milton Isco says, what is your main type of capitalism you support? I would support a regulated capitalism that is balanced out with some socialism and communism. Alexander says, I'm personally a British Tory conservative, but I don't agree with reform and restore. I'm glad to hear that, Alexander, but why are you conservative as opposed to being Green or Labour? Will says, would you say you're left wing or right wing? I'm left wing. Norwich says, thoughts on remigration. I'm not really sure what that means. James Welsh says, I don't think you can judge politics that is within the 5 years. What I mean is comparing Biden or even Trump's first term. I think you need to wait to see what happens with their policies, unless it's oddly stupid and affects us more right now. I think there's some accuracy to that, James Welsh, but I do think that you can make certain, comparisons. Like, for example, Joe Biden put somebody in charge of the FTC that was breaking up monopolies. Trump did not. Joe Biden put somebody in charge of the EPA that wanted to protect the environment. Trump has not, et cetera, et cetera. All right, James. Yeah, still waiting for you, buddy. Where are you at? Okay. Alexander says Green wants to legalize. Labor makes a lot of fake promises. Tories ran the country fine. I don't know a ton about UK politics, but it does not seem, from my perspective, that Tories ran the country fine. It appears as though the conservative parties in the UK mess up the economy and kind of like do the bidding of the billionaire class as much or more than the conservative parties here in America. I don't really believe that Labour makes a lot of fake promises. My take on this, again, not being from the UK, is that in the UK, you do not give any grace to left-wing parties, but you give a lot of grace to right-wing parties. We suffer from that also here in America, so I'm not throwing any tea or shade your way, but I just think that it is important to recognize that bias exists, because that bias 100% exists here in America, and I'm confident it exists in the UK as well. Alrighty, let's see here. 312 says, did you see Melania bring up Epstein today? I did not see Melania bring up Epstein today. Yeah, Tyler, I was really hoping to get into it with you about why you call yourself a Republican, Tyler, but I'm not seeing your response to my cue, my guy. All right, I'm gonna have to wrap things up. I went a little long today. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for all the support and the comments and the questions and the gifts and the likes and the shares. I appreciate any support that you guys give, even if it's just throwing me a follow or telling your friends how great the show is. If you appreciate what I'm doing here, you think I'm doing the right thing, and you want to support me, you can do that financially as well, though I know that it's difficult. We are all struggling financially because of the cost of living crisis that the Trump administration is making worse by the second. But if you have the dollars and you want to throw my way because you like what I'm doing, there are many ways in which you can do that. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. And if you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, if you're already paying for Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. Costs you $0, helps me out a ton. You can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Special thanks to my regular financial contributors, Muzz King, Pliff, Average Joe, It's the Rocketeer, Lauren, Triska, the Two Seans, D, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. If you would also like to have your name right at the end and a special thank you, join the Twitch, be a Twitch subscriber, be a TikTok superfan, or join the Patreon. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If there are any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, please feel free to reach out. Do not be shy. I want to be a resource for you. I want to be a resource for you to be more involved and more informed about politics. So if there's any way that I can do that, use me and abuse me, use me until I am all used up. I'm trying to do a new kind of politics where we don't get into fights and we actually engage and try to change people's minds and vote for better politicians over worse politicians. So help me help you be a part of that coalition by reaching out to me. Shoot me a DM. DMs are open. You can email me through my website, or you can hit me up on my Discord channel. The Discord is also great because there's a community there of awesome people. There's recommendations there for books and podcasts and civic actions that you can take, and nonprofit organizations that desperately need you to volunteer your time and money. And I just genuinely hope that everybody who's watching this does the work, because it is only through us doing the work that we're going to be able to get out of this. Hold on a second. James Social, I think that's fair. I am very big on the fact that history should judge the decisions we make in politics. Is politics, for example, I don't think that we will have a draft. Yeah, possibly, but I think it's instructive. Trump usually likes to float out these ideas before he implements them to try to soften how shocking they would be. So, I'm not going to say it's definitely going to happen, but I'm not saying it's definitely not going to happen. All right, lastly, just please do the work, everybody, because there are good people in the government and there's good people in the DOJ, but they do not have the resources or the political power to do this work themselves. So we need to help them. So please get out there and help them, do the work, and then we will get out of this. And be good to each other. You don't have to be a dick to do the work. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. I will see you guys tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great Thursday, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye. 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 Goodbye.